The most powerful duke in England just died, and named a forgotten spinster as his heir. But the 12 letters he left behind? They're about to reveal a secret that changes everything.
The letter arrived on a Tuesday, which made it worse somehow. Cordelia Ashworth had spent 27 years learning to expect nothing, so when the solicitor's clerk appeared at the cottage door with rain dripping from his hat brim, she knew before he spoke that someone had died. "Miss Ashworth," he held out a cream envelope, thick as a book. "From Pemberton and Sons, regarding the late Duke of Thornfield." Her hands went cold. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. The clerk shifted his weight, mud from his boots seeping onto the doormat her mother had braided the winter before she died. "You're to present yourself at Thornfield Manor within the fortnight. The will cannot be read without you." Cordelia took the envelope. It was heavy, as sealed with black wax and a crest she'd once traced with her finger on a different letter, one that had never been sent. The paper smelled like saddle leather and pipe smoke and something else, something that made her throat tight. "There must be a mistake," she said. "No mistake, miss." The clerk tipped his hat. The Duke was quite specific. After he left, Cordelia stood in the doorway, watching the rain turn the road to mud. The envelope burned in her hands like a living thing. Inside, she broke the seal. "To Miss Cordelia Ashworth, eldest daughter of the late Reverend Thomas Ashworth. You are hereby summoned to attend the reading of the last will and testament of His Grace, Magnus Blackwood, 4th Duke of Thornfield, who departed this life on the 19th of October, 1847. Magnus Blackwood was dead, but the man who had ruined her life was dead, and somehow he'd managed to reach back from the grave to ruin it again. Cordelia's sisters had married well. Beatrice had wed Lord Carrington 3 years ago, and now lived in a house in Bath with servants and a music room. Millicent had caught the eye of Lord Fletcher at a county assembly, and though he was 40 and already had a son nearly her age, she wore silk now and sent letters on perfumed paper. But Cordelia had stayed in the cottage where they'd grown up, mending other people's clothes and growing herbs in the garden. 27 was old for marriage. 27 with no dowry and a face people called handsome instead of pretty was practically a death sentence. She'd made her peace with it. Mostly. The journey to Thornfield took 3 days by coach, yet Cordelia brought one trunk and her mother's prayer book, though she hadn't prayed in years. Not since the night she'd waited in the garden folly at Thornfield Manor, wearing her best dress and her grandmother's pearl earrings, certain that Magnus Blackwood was going to ask her father for permission to court her. He never came. Instead, she'd learned the next morning that he'd left for London without a word. 6 months later, he married Lady Victoria Pemberton, daughter of an earl, a woman with golden hair and a dowry that could buy a small country. Cordelia had been 19 then, young enough to cry herself sick, old enough to know better. Now the coach rattled up the gravel drive to Thornfield Manor, and Cordelia pressed her face to the window. The house looked the same. Gray stone covered in ivy, windows like watching eyes, and the east wing, where she'd once attended a ball and danced 3 times with a duke who'd made her believe she was something special. A servant met her at the door, not the butler she remembered, but a younger man with a pinched face. "Miss Ashworth, you're expected. The other beneficiaries are in the blue drawing room." Other beneficiaries? Cordelia followed him through hallways that smelled of beeswax and old wood. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "How many?" "Just 2, miss. Lady Victoria and yourself." The widow. Of course. The blue drawing room was exactly as she remembered. Silk wallpaper the color of robin's eggs. Furniture that cost more than her father had earned in his entire life. And standing by the window, dressed in black mourning silk that probably cost more than Cordelia's cottage, was Lady Victoria Blackwood. But she turned when Cordelia entered. 8 years had been kind to her. She was still beautiful, still golden, but there was something brittle around her eyes. "So you came," Victoria said. Her voice was cool as December frost. "I wasn't sure you would. I was summoned. We all do what Magnus wants, even now." Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. She moved to the sideboard and poured herself a glass of sherry without offering one to Cordelia. "Do you know why you're here?" "The letter said something about a will." "His will?" Victoria took a long drink. "My husband's final joke. Tell me, Miss Ashworth, did you love him?" The question hit like a slap. Cordelia felt blood rush to her face. "I barely knew him." "Liar." Victoria set down her glass with a sharp click. "I've had 8 years to wonder about you. The Reverend's daughter. You're the girl he danced with at the spring ball and then ran from like the house was on fire." "He married you?" "Yes, he married me. And do you know what he said on our wedding night?" Victoria's eyes were bright, feverish. "He said your name." The door opened before Cordelia could respond. The solicitor entered, a portly man with spectacles and an air of weary professionalism. He carried a leather document case and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Ladies, shall we begin?" They sat. Cordelia in a chair that felt too large, Victoria on the settee with her spine rigid as iron. The solicitor arranged his papers with maddening slowness. "The last will and testament of Magnus Blackwood, 4th Duke of Thornfield, written in his own hand on the 10th of October, 1847, 9 days before his death." He cleared his throat. "I, Magnus Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby make the following bequests." Cordelia's hands were shaking. She folded them in her lap. "To my wife, Lady Victoria Blackwood, I leave the London house and an annual sum of £5,000, the entirety of my personal fortune, excluding the entailed properties." Victoria didn't move, didn't even blink. "To Miss Cordelia Ashworth, eldest daughter of the late Reverend Thomas Ashworth, I leave Thornfield Manor, all lands and holdings associated with the dukedom, and the title of Duchess of Thornfield, along with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereof." The room went silent. Cordelia couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The words made no sense, couldn't possibly mean what they seemed to mean. "Well, there must be a mistake," she whispered. "No mistake." The solicitor looked at her over his spectacles. "Though the bequest comes with conditions, you must reside at Thornfield Manor for a period of no less than 1 year. You must assume all duties of the Duchess, including management of the estate and tenants. And you must read a series of letters the Duke left in his private study. 1 per month for 12 months. Only then will the inheritance be fully yours." "This is madness." Victoria stood, her face white. "She can't be a duchess. She's nobody. Her father was a country parson who died in debt. Nevertheless, it is the Duke's express wish." "Why?" Cordelia found her voice, though it came out hoarse. "Why would he do this?" The solicitor reached into his case and withdrew a smaller envelope. But this one was addressed in handwriting she recognized. Masculine, bold, the letters sharp as knife cuts. "He left this for you, to be read after the will." Cordelia took it with numb fingers, broke the seal. Inside was a single sentence, written in Magnus Blackwood's hand. "Because I was a coward, and you deserved better than a coward's silence." Cordelia couldn't sleep in a dead man's house. The servants had given her the rose bedroom in the east wing, a sprawling space with velvet curtains and a 4-poster bed large enough for 3 people. Everything smelled of lavender sachets and furniture polish, but underneath it all was something else. Decay, maybe, or just the particular sadness that settles into places where people have stopped being happy. She sat by the window in her nightgown, watching moonlight paint silver across the gardens. The note from Magnus burned in her pocket like a coal. "Because I was a coward." 7 words that explained nothing and everything at once. A knock came at dawn. Soft, hesitant. "Miss Ashworth?" A maid's voice. "Mrs. Thornby says breakfast is laid, and there's someone here to see you." Cordelia dressed quickly, fingers clumsy on the buttons. Her own clothes looked shabby in this room, the brown wool dress patched at the elbows. She pinned up her dark hair and tried not to think about how Victoria had looked yesterday, draped in expensive mourning like a beautiful ghost. Downstairs, a man waited in the breakfast room. Tall, angular, with graying hair and tired eyes. He stood when she entered and bowed slightly. "Miss Ashworth, I'm Dr. William Graves. I tended to the Duke during his final illness." "How did he die?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. She softened it. "The letter didn't say." "His heart." Dr. Graves gestured for her to sit, then poured her tea without asking if she wanted any. His hands were steady, competent. He'd been ill for months, but he hid it well. Didn't want Victoria to know. Or anyone, really, except me. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he asked me to." The doctor sat across from her, his face grave. "He left instructions. I was to wait until after the will reading, then come speak with you. But there are things you need to know about Magnus Blackwood before you decide whether to stay." Cordelia's stomach twisted. What kind of things? The kind that explain why a duke would leave everything to a woman he hadn't spoken to in 8 years. Dr. Graves pulled a worn journal from his coat pocket. He kept records, medical notes mostly, but toward the end they became something else. A confession, I think. He wanted you to have this. The journal was leather-bound, edges soft with handling. Cordelia took it but didn't open it. "I don't understand any of this. Why me? Why not his wife?" "Victoria was never his wife. Not really." Dr. Graves stood, moving to the window. Beyond the glass, groundskeepers were trimming hedges, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Their marriage was an arrangement. Her father needed money. Magnus needed an heir. But there was never any affection between them. Never any children either, though they tried. That's not my concern, isn't it? You're about to become the Duchess of Thornfield. Everything here will be yours. The tenants, the staff, the debts. Yes, there are debts. Victoria's father bled this estate nearly dry before he died. Magnus spent the last 5 years trying to repair the damage. The doctor turned back to her. He chose you because he believed you were the only person he'd ever met who understood what it meant to have nothing and still maintain dignity. Cordelia's throat felt tight. He didn't know me. He knew you better than you think. Dr. Graves moved toward the door, then paused. The first letter is in his study. 3rd floor, west wing. Mrs. Thornby has the key. I'd suggest you read it before Victoria wakes. She's not taking this well. After he left, Cordelia sat alone with the journal and her cold tea. The house creaked around her, settling into its bones. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed. She opened the journal. March 15th, 1847. The cough has returned. Graves says it's my heart, not my lungs, but I feel it in my chest like drowning. Victoria asked if I was well at breakfast. I told her yes. We haven't touched each other in 2 years. Cordelia flipped forward. April 3rd. Saw a woman in the village today who reminded me of Cordelia Ashworth. Same dark hair, same way of holding her shoulders back like she was bracing for a blow. I nearly called out before I realized my mistake. It's been 8 years. She probably doesn't remember me. Why would she? I was cruel. Her hands shook, but she kept reading. May 20th. Graves tells me I have perhaps a year. Less if I don't rest. But I can't rest. Not yet. There's too much to repair. The South Tenant farms are failing. The roof in the servant quarters leaks. Victoria spends money we don't have on dresses she doesn't need. And I am tired. So tired of pretending this life was what I wanted. The entries grew darker. more painful. June 14th. I dreamed of the spring ball again. Cordelia in that pale blue dress, laughing at something I'd said. We danced 3 times. I wanted to dance a 4th, but people were already talking. Her father was a parson. She had no money, no connections, and I was a coward who cared more about what people thought than about the only person who'd ever made me feel like I could breathe. Cordelia closed the journal. She couldn't read anymore. Not yet, Mrs. Beth Thornby, the housekeeper, was a stout woman with kind eyes and calloused hands. She led Cordelia up 2 flights of stairs to the west wing without speaking. The study door was oak, heavy, with a brass lock that clicked open with an old-fashioned key. "He spent most of his time here these last months," Mrs. Thornby said softly. "Wouldn't let anyone in, not even to clean." The room smelled like pipe tobacco and old paper. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling. A desk sat by the window, covered in correspondence and half-finished letters. And on the mantelpiece, propped against a clock that had stopped at 3:30, was an envelope with her name written in Magnus's hand. Letter 1. April. Cordelia broke the seal with shaking fingers. Dear Cordelia, if you're reading this, I'm dead. I don't expect you to mourn me. I don't deserve your tears. But I hope you'll give me 12 months to explain why I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me, and why I'm trying to repair it now, too late, from beyond the grave. Do you remember the night of the spring ball? You wore blue. I told you it matched your eyes, which was a lie. Your eyes are brown. But I was nervous and stupid and falling in love with the daughter of a country parson when I was already promised to someone else. My father arranged the marriage to Victoria before he died. A deathbed promise. Her family had money we desperately needed. The estate was failing even then. I told myself it didn't matter. That love was a luxury dukes couldn't afford. But then I met you, and I realized I'd been dead my entire life until you smiled at me. I should have fought for you, and I should have told my father's ghost to go to hell. Instead, I ran. I married Victoria 3 months later in a ceremony that felt like a funeral, and I spent 8 years trying to forget your face. I never could. This estate is yours now, not because I'm trying to buy forgiveness. I know better. But because you're the only person I trust to care for it the way it deserves. The tenants need someone who remembers what it's like to be poor. The land needs someone who won't bleed it dry for ball gowns and gambling debts. Read the other letters. They'll explain everything. And if, at the end of the year, you decide to sell it all and never think of me again, I'll understand. But I hope you'll stay. Yours in death as I should have been in life. Magnus. Cordelia read it twice, then a 3rd time. Her vision blurred, and a sound behind her made her turn. Victoria stood in the doorway, still in her dressing gown, her golden hair loose around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. "He really did love you," Victoria said quietly. "I used to hate you for it, but now I think I just pity us both." "Victoria, I didn't." "I know." Victoria moved into the room, running her finger along the edge of the desk. "You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did I. We were both just foolish enough to want a man who didn't know how to love anyone, including himself." She picked up a small portrait frame from the desk, turned it so Cordelia could see. It was a miniature painting. A young woman in a blue dress, dark hair pinned up, brown eyes bright with laughter. It was Cordelia, from the night of the ball, 8 years ago. "He kept it on his desk," Victoria whispered. "Every day, for 8 years. I used to come in here when he was away and stare at it, trying to understand what you had that I didn't." "Victoria, don't." Victoria set the portrait down carefully. "Don't apologize. Don't explain. Just tell me one thing. Are you going to stay?" Cordelia looked at the letter in her hands, at the portrait on the desk. at the journal full of confessions from a dead man who'd loved her too late. "Yeah, I don't know," she said honestly. Victoria nodded. "That's more honest than he ever was." She left, her footsteps fading down the hall. Cordelia stood alone in Magnus Blackwood's study, surrounded by his books and his secrets and his ghosts, and wondered if it was possible to inherit someone's regrets, along with their fortune. 3 months passed like a fever dream. Cordelia threw herself into the work of becoming a duchess, the way drowning people cling to driftwood. She met with tenants who eyed her worn dresses and calloused hands with suspicion that slowly melted into cautious respect. She walked fields with the estate manager, learning which crops failed and why. She sat through endless meetings with solicitors about debts and investments and repairs the manor desperately needed. And every month, she read another letter. Itmay's letter told her about his wedding night, how he'd gotten drunk on brandy and called out her name in his sleep. Victoria had slapped him. They never shared a bed again. June's letter described the investments he'd made to save the estate, selling his father's art collection piece by piece, dismissing half the staff. The guilt of it had eaten him alive. July's letter was shorter, angrier. He wrote about watching her at church from a distance 5 years ago, seeing her mend her own gloves during the sermon. He'd wanted to go to her. Instead, he'd ridden home and punched a hole through his study wall. By August, Cordelia had begun to understand. Magnus Blackwood hadn't been cruel. He'd been trapped, and too afraid to break free until death gave him no choice. She found Victoria in the music room one afternoon, playing piano, something melancholy by Chopin that made the air feel heavy. "I'm leaving next week," Victoria said without stopping. "Going to Bath. My sister has a house there. I think I'll take lovers and scandalize the neighborhood. It sounds more honest than what I've been doing." "Victoria, don't." Victoria's hand stilled on the keys. "Don't pity me. I got £5,000 a year and my freedom. That's more than most wives get." She turned on the bench, her blue eyes clear for the first time since Cordelia had arrived. "But I need to tell you something before I go. About the night of the spring ball." Cordelia's chest tightened. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Victoria stood, moving to the window. "Magnus came to the garden folly that night. I saw him. I was there first, and hiding because I'd had too much champagne, and my corset was too tight. I watched him pace for 20 minutes, rehearsing what he was going to say to you. He had a ring in his pocket, his mother's ring." The room tilted. Cordelia gripped the back of a chair. "My father found him there," Victoria continued. "Told him the engagement was being announced that night, that his own father had signed the contracts on his deathbed, that breaking it would ruin both families financially. Magnus begged, actually begged. My father threatened to tell everyone Magnus had been meeting you in secret, said your reputation would be destroyed. So he chose you. He chose duty, and it killed him slowly." Victoria picked up her gloves from the side table. "I used to hate you for making him unhappy. Now, I think you were the only thing that ever made him feel alive. Don't waste it, Cordelia. Don't waste what he gave you." She left, silk skirts whispering against the doorframe. Cordelia sank into a chair, her mind spinning. All these years, she'd thought Magnus had simply changed his mind, that she hadn't been enough. But he'd been ready to fight for her, had wanted to fight for her, until fear won. The final letter waited in his study. December's letter. She'd avoided it for 3 days, afraid of what it might say, what it might ask of her. But on a cold morning when frost painted the windows white, she finally climbed the stairs and opened the envelope. "Dear Cordelia, if you've read this far, you've stayed the full year. That's more than I deserved to hope for. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'll ask for something else. Live. Not the half-life I chose, where duty crushes everything soft and real. But a real life. Messy and complicated and full of choices that matter. Use this estate to help people. The tenants, the servants, the village families who have nothing. You know what hunger feels like, what it's like to mend the same dress until the thread gives out. Don't forget, and if you can, find someone who makes you feel the way you made me feel, like the world had color I'd never noticed before, like breathing was something worth doing. I loved you, Cordelia Ashworth. I loved you badly, and too late, and not nearly enough while I was alive. But I loved you, and I'm sorry. The desk has a hidden drawer. Bottom left, press the carved rose. Inside is my mother's ring. The one I meant to give you that night in the garden. Well, it's yours now. Whether you wear it or sell it or throw it in the pond, it belongs to you. Thank you for giving me 12 months of knowing you were here, in my house, walking the same halls I walked. It's the closest to redemption a coward like me deserves. Always yours, Magnus. Cordelia's hands shook as she pressed the carved rose on the desk. The drawer clicked open. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a gold ring set with a single sapphire, blue as the dress she'd worn 8 years ago, blue as the sky on the day everything changed. She slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Behind her, someone cleared their throat. Dr. Graves stood in the doorway, hat in hand. I'm sorry to intrude. Mrs. Thornby said you were here. It's all right. Cordelia wiped her eyes quickly. Is something wrong? No. Actually, I came to say goodbye. But I'm leaving for London. There's a hospital there that needs surgeons. He paused. But I wanted to ask if you'd had a chance to read the journal, the last entry. Not yet. You should, before I go. He set something on the chair by the door. A dried rose, brown with age, pressed between 2 pieces of glass. He kept this, from the night of the ball. You dropped it when you were dancing. After he left, Cordelia opened the journal to the final page. October 10th, 1847. I am dying. This is not metaphor. My heart is giving out. Graves says perhaps a week, perhaps less. I have made arrangements, changed my will, given Thornfield to the woman who should have been its duchess all along. Victoria will hate me for it. I don't blame her. I've been a terrible husband. But I was an even worse man the night I chose money over love and called it duty. If there's an afterlife, I hope Cordelia finds happiness, real happiness, the kind I was too afraid to reach for. And if she ever stands in the garden folly where I should have proposed, I hope she knows I'm there too, in whatever way dead men can be. Still loving her, still sorry, still wishing I'd been brave. Cordelia closed the journal. Outside, the December sun was setting, painting everything gold and pink. On impulse, she grabbed her cloak and walked through the house to the gardens. The folly was exactly as she remembered. White stone columns wrapped in dormant wisteria. A bench where she'd sat 8 years ago. Heart pounding, certain her life was about to begin. She sat there now, watching her breath fog in the cold air.